Today's daf is Chaf Beis, but we finished up at the Mishnah, the first of the two Mishnayos on daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. The Mishnah says that Paroches Shenitmeis Bivlad Hatuma Matbilin Osa Mibifnim. The Paroches, which was the curtain in the Beis Hamikdash, in the second Mikdash, there was no kotzel between the Heichal and the Kodesh Kadoshim, and what separated them were two curtains. And this is the Gemara Masechet Yomi on Daf Nun Aleph. There were other curtains in the Beis Hamikdash. They totaled 13 of them. 7 of them were at the entrance into the Azara, 1 at the entrance into the Ulam, 1 at the entrance into the Heichal, and 2 separating the Heichal from the Kodesh Kadoshim. And the Mishnah specifically focuses on the paroches that separated the Heichal from the Kodesh Kadoshim. Now, we can classify tumas on a doraisa level as avos hatuma and vlodos hatuma. And basically, we have of avatuma, which means that the source of the tuma is inherent in the person, the zav, the zava, or in an animal like a nevela or a sheretz, a dead crawling, creeping creature. These are all avos hatuma. Anything that's acquired by contact with those avos hatuma are considered what we call a vlad hatuma. And an avatuma has a special status in that it's metame adam v'kelim ochlin umashkin, whereas a vlad hatuma is only metame ochlin umashkin, not adam and not kelim. That's all on a doraisa level as formulated by the Mishnah in the 8th parak of Bara. However, midrabanan, if a liquid substance becomes tame by contact with the avatuma, then that liquid substance now could be metame keli. That's only midrabanan, because on a doraisa level, only an avatum is metame keli, and not a vladatum. But in this case of a liquid, because they were afraid of liquids that came out of the body of a zav, which have the status of an avatuma, therefore they gave the status of a liquid that came in contact with an avatuma, namely a liquid that's a vladatuma, that it is metame kalim. So mashkin on metame kalim midrabanan. Now, in this case of the Mishnah, we're talking about a paroches that we discussed earlier that came in contact with a vladatuma, and that's called paroches shenitmeis bevladatuma. And the paroches has the status of a kli. It came in contact with a liquid substance that in turn had come in contact with an avatuma. And even though on a deraisa level, as we said before, a liquid, a mashke, is not metame kelim, but here the Rabbanan said it's metame kelim. And we have to do a tvila to be metayer the paroches from its tuma, the Rabbanan, of nitmeis al yidei vlad hatuma. And where did that tvila take place? It took place bifnim, meaning in the Hazar itself, there was a mikveh that was called the parava, and that's where they had the water of the mikveh, and that's where they were tovel the parochas. And he says here, just read this note. He says that that matbilor so bifnim hazara, and he says b'mayonos ub'mikvos shahayu sham ba'azara, And in the note, he says that that was in the base Haparva, which is in the Azor. Umachnisan osam miyad, v'tolen osam b'mkoma. Immediately after they would tovel it, they didn't have to wait till Hariv Shemesh. They would hang it back in its place, because since it was only nitma, bevlada tuma, therefore it doesn't require Hariv Shemesh. So again, we're talking about a kli that came in contact with a liquid that came in contact with an avatuma, and therefore this kli does not need Hariv Shemesh. All it needs is tefillah in a mikveh. That's one of the fundamental differences between Tuma Doraisa and Tuma Dorabana, as far as Kalim are concerned. But if a sheretz or a nevela or any other avatuma came in direct contact with the parokas, is then matbilin osav bachutz. Then the tvila in the mikveh would take place outside of the azara. And that's because the tumah now is doraisa, and anything that's tummy doraisa has to be removed from the azara, which means has to be removed not only from the azara, but also from the Ezras Noshim, and even from the chel, which is the area beyond the Ezras Noshim. However, once they already would tovel it outside of the azara and outside of the chel, as we said before, on somewhere on the harabayis, then the paroches now needs what's called shiluach, and shotchenosa after the tefillah, and they want to now dry it off bechel, because it has the same status as a tvul yom, and a tvul yom is allowed to enter into the chel, and so too nitmeis bi'avat tuma, the parochas itself has a status in tuma as equivalent to the tvul yom. And a tvul yom, of course, needs Hariv Shemesh, but nevertheless he's allowed to enter into the chel. And here we're not going to take the parochas immediately into the azara, mipnei shehi tzricha Hariv Shemesh, because since it came in contact directly with an avatuma, and therefore its tuma is doraisa, it requires Hariv Shemesh like a tful yom, and therefore we have to wait before we bring this parochas, even after tefillah, into the azara. We have to wait until Hariv Shemesh. Now the Mishnah goes on to talk about where they would spread out the parochas after the tefillah to dry. And the Mishnah speaks about imhoisa chadosha. And every year they would replace the parochas with a new parochas. And there was a takana d'Rabbanan, a gzera d'Rabbanan that required tefillah. Because again, even though it's a new curtain, you never know where it may have or how it may have become tameh. And that's a tefillah that's required midrabbanan. And in this case, because it's a brand new parochas and it was absolutely beautiful, as the Mishnah is going to describe in detail, therefore, shotchin osa al gabe ha-itztaba. Itztaba, there were rows of benches on the harbayis, and there was a covering over the rows of benches, which is called an itztaba, which would protect them from the elements. And that was a very high place, which could be seen from anywhere in the vicinity of the harabayis, and therefore they would dry it on this roof of the benches that cover the benches, that the people would be in amazement of seeing the absolute beauty, the stunning. We'll see all the work that went into creating the parochas. They would apprehend its beauty, and the Rash Soleo adds that as a result, they would be motivated to want to contribute towards the creation of the next parochas. And now the Mishnah describes the handiwork, how it was created, the parochas. And Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer Mishum Rav Shimon ben Askan, parochas ovyo tefach. It was a tefach thick, very thick curtain. Al shivim ushtayim nimim nereges. It was woven on 72 heddle shafts. The al kol nema v'nema, with regard to every single thread, esrim v'arba chutiv. It was really 24 different strands. We'll see other opinions of the Gemara that double that number even. Arka, its length was arboim amma, rochva esrim amma, and the Mishnah now, with a little bit of an exaggeration, we'll see, but it reflects on how much money went in to the creation of a parochas, which was made of so many different strands and different kinds of substances. As we'll see the psukim soon, it was shmonim u'shtayim ribo hoisa nasis, 2,800 golden dinar. That's how much it cost. U'shtayim osim b'chol shana. They would create not only one parochas, but 2 parochases were created on an annual basis, were manufactured, and these would separate in the Beis Hamikdash Hasheni the heichal from the Kodesh Kadoshim. And the Mishnah says, Shlosh Me'as Kodim Matbilanos, in order to be matbil, the parochas that was so massive, 40 amos high and 20 amos wide and so thick, with so many strands and threads, they needed 300 kodim in order to drop it into the mikveh and pick it up from the mikveh. The Gemara is going to say that's a guzma. Now let's start the Gemara. And the Gemara tries to analyze now in the psukim, how do we derive the conclusion that the parochas was made, each thread, of 24 different strands? And the pasuk says, "V'yasisa." This is in Shmos Perek Vav. "V'yasisa paroches, tcheles, argaman, v'solas shani, v'sheish mosar." These are different kinds of threads. It's turquoise, it's purple, scarlet wool, and then it says, that's the key word, is moshzar, twisted pishtan. Pishtan meaning linen. That's called moshzar. Now, in order to appreciate what moshzar is and how many threads were twisted together to make moshzar, we're going to analyze different words that could have been written in the pasuk and would have meant less than moshzar, so that we appreciate what moshzar is. Echad, if the Torah, ilu haya chut echad, had Torah had said that all you need is one thread, that would imply kaful. That would imply all we need is one strand. But if it would have said kaful, double it over, lishnaim, that would imply that you would double over the thread. It would be thicker. It would twice the thickness. It would be made of 2 strands, two chutim. If it would have said shazur, that would have indicated twisted that we add a 3rd strand. And now we're ready for the word that the Torah actually does employ, namely moshzar, which implies that we double what we would have thought it would have been had it said shazur. And we came to the conclusion that in this Mandi Omar, shazur would mean 3 threads, and therefore, excuse me, moshzar means double it, which is 6 threads. Arba, there are 4 types of of fibers. We have tcheles, argaman, tolas, shani, v'sheish. So let's multiply those 4 strands times 6 strands, and we end up with 24 strands. Tani, And we learned in the Brisa, Shloshim, which time the second opinion says that there were no less than 32 strands. How do we derive that? So the Gemara explains that. And David, I'll clue you in when we get to the next Mishnah. We're almost up to the next Mishnah, which is on the bottom of Chaf Aleph on the base. Ilu Amar Chut, according to the second opinion, Chut, of course, would mean one thread. Echad. If the Torah would have said kaful, it would have implied shnayim, that we double it over, and that would mean 2 strands. But now this Mandi Omer says that the word shazar hadn't appeared in the Torah, would imply that we take these 2 strands and we double them, and therefore it's arba. Not like the first opinion that shazar would imply adding 1 extra thread. Now we're doubling it, we add 2 extra threads, and now the Torah uses the word mashzar. Mashzar always means to double it. So we're now going to double 4 strands. That's going to give us 8 strands. And now we take the 8 strands and we multiply it by the 4 different types and categories of strands, the argomon, etc. And 4 times 8 is 32. Is therefore mikan ha klasin u train. Tana, we have a third opinion that our boy Mushmona, there were as many as 48 strands. Ilu amar chut, it would be echad. Kaful, it would be shnayim. Leah, now we introduce another term that the Torah omitted, and that's clear. Clear would have meant that it was braided, and we would add a 3rd strand. Therefore, we take shazar, which according to all opinions doubles it, and now we're going to double 3, and that's going to give us 6, which we have to multiply by 4, because mashzar now is twice 6, correct? And therefore we get it up to 12, which we multiply by 4, and mikan ha'arba mutimya. Now we get 48 strands. Now the Gemara points out that with regard to the paroches, the Torah in 2 different psukim uses 2 different terms. Kosav echad omer, in one pasuk it says ma'aser rokem, which rokem is embroidery. And in another pasuk, we'll read the 2 psukim in just a minute, the pasuk says ma'aser choshev. Choshev means when there's machshava, there's design. So the first pasuk says v'asisa. This is these both psukim appear in Shmos Perek Chavav, and we're going to begin with the later pasuk, which is Lamed Vav, and the other pasuk says v'asisa masach lepesach ha'oel cheles v'argaman v'solah shani v'sheish mashzar ma'aser rokem. Rokem meaning embroidery. And the embroidery has to do with the images that were displayed on the parochas, as we'll soon see in the Gemara. Now we go back to pasuk Lamed Aleph in the same Perek Chaf Vav, and it says Vasisa parochas tchelos v'argamon solah shani v'sheish mashzar ma'aser choshev yasa osom kruvim. Now the pasuk uses the term ma'aser choshev, not ma'aser rokem, but ma'aser choshev. Okay, then. So that's what we have over here. So how do we reconcile these 2 psukim? And keep in mind the pasuk of ma'aser choshev appears over and over again throughout the Asiyas HaMishkan. Or says there are 2 opinions about this, about how to reconcile this. Ma'aser rokem, parts of echad. Embroidery means that there's only one face of some living creature that's embroidered on one side of the paroches, whereas ma'aser choshev is shnei partzufos. A designer will place 2 different images of 2 different creatures on both sides, as we'll soon see, of the paroches. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nechemia, there's a machlokas here. Chad Omar, according to one opinion, when we focus on the difference between ma'aser rokem and ma'aser choshev, ma'aser rokem would be ari mikan v'chalak mikan. there was a lion embroidered on one side of the paroches, and the other side of the paroches was blank. Masechet, on the other hand, means harimi kan varimi kan. On both sides of the paroches, they embroidered a beautiful image of a lion. But according to the other opinion, Maisa Roke means Arimi Kan Varimi Kan. Even when we talk about the embroidery, there was an embroidered image on both sides of the paroches. And Maisa Choshev, the work of a designer, is Arimi Kan V'Nesher Mikan. There was a different image on the other side. And the commentaries say it didn't have to be necessarily a nesher, which is an eagle. It could have been any other living creature. Now the Mishnah says, "B'shmona mushtayim ribo hoisa nases." The monies that it cost to create this paroches, any paroches, was 2,800 dinrim, gold dinrim. Of Yitzchak bar Bizna b'shem Shmuel Guzma. This is just an exaggeration. Very often, we find in Chazal they throw out very large numbers just to indicate how massive it was. And the Vilna Gaon has a whole cheshbon here about how they came up with the number 2,800. And Taman Taninon, elsewhere in the Mishnah, we have Amim Haya Allah Kishlosh Me'as Kur. The Mishnah elsewhere talks about the volume of ashes. It's a Mishnah Masechet Tamid that piled up as a result of the Torah Gabit Mizbeach, as if it was 300 kur. Now a kur is equal to 30 sa. And although it's true that there was an accumulation of ashes, but it couldn't be that the amount of ashes was 30 kur times 300. I mean, that's 675 cubic amos. That's like massive. And Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Ban b'shem Shmuel Guzma. And we have also, with regard to that Mishnah Talmud, the comment that it's a Guzma. So 300 is a number that's very often used as an exaggeration. And this leads us to the Mishnah on the bottom of Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Beis. Okay then.